Human medic saves dying alien beast, reaches its breathtaking climax, as Everett races against time to create a revolutionary genetic treatment, while the ship shudders under enemy fire. With only 60 minutes remaining, he merges human medical principles with Kree technology to stabilize the sacred Vorax's deteriorating DNA, potentially saving not just the creature, but an entire alien civilization from extinction. The violet sky crackled with lightning, casting eerie flashes across the barren landscape. Everett Pierce squinted through the sandstorm, his military-grade respirator wheezing with each labored breath. The desert planet's atmosphere was technically breathable, but the constant grit made it feel like inhaling ground glass. As the medical officer for the 3rd Colonial Legion, he'd seen his share of hostile environments, but this forsaken rock seemed determined to top the list. Behind him, the smoking wreckage of their transport ship jutted from the sand like a broken bone. The navigation systems had failed during atmospheric entry, sending them into a catastrophic spiral. Somehow, he'd survived the crash, dragging himself from the twisted metal before the engines could detonate. "Calloway? Mercer!" Everett called into his comm unit, receiving only static in response. The rest of the crew had been in the cockpit during impact. He'd been in the medbay, strapping down supplies when the alarms blared. That separation had saved his life. He trudged forward, medical kit slung over his shoulder. The mysterious passenger they'd been transporting was nowhere to be seen. Military command had been characteristically tight-lipped about the assignment. A simple escort mission, they'd said. Get in, pick up the VIP, get out. No names, no details. Just coordinates and the highest security clearance Everett had ever witnessed. A trail of dark fluid caught his attention, glistening on the sand. Too viscous for water, too purple for human blood. Everett frowned, adjusting his scanner to analyze the substance. The readings were bizarre, complex molecular structures his database couldn't identify. The trail led away from the crash site, toward a rock formation in the distance. Survival protocol dictated he should stay with the wreckage, activate the emergency beacon, and wait for extraction. But the medical officer in him couldn't ignore a potential casualty, especially one leaving a trail of what was almost certainly blood. He followed the fluid trail for nearly an hour, the rock formation growing larger with each step. As he drew closer, Everett realized it wasn't a natural formation at all, but rather some kind of ancient structure, half buried in the sand. The trail disappeared into a dark opening at its base. Everett activated his helmet light and stepped inside. The sudden shelter from the howling winds a welcome relief. The purple fluid was more concentrated here, pooling in places. Whatever was bleeding had come this way. And recently, the passage widened into a cavernous chamber, and Everett's light swept across something that made him freeze in place. At first, his brain struggled to process the scale of what he was seeing. Lying on the stone floor was a creature the size of a cargo shuttle. Its body was covered in what appeared to be iridescent scales that shifted color with each labored breath. Multiple limbs, he counted 6, were tucked against a serpentine body that tapered to a powerful tail. What might have been a head was adorned with sensory appendages that reminded Everett of both antennae and tentacles. Most significantly, a deep wound pulsed on the creature's flank, leaking the purple fluid he'd been tracking. Everett's medical training kicked in despite his shock. He approached cautiously, scanner in hand. The creature's vital signs were erratic but strong, suggesting it was merely injured, not dying. Not yet, anyway. "Hello?" he called out, unsure if the being was sentient or simply an animal. "I'm a medic, I can help you." The creature's nearest eye, a massive orb with a vertical pupil, swiveled toward him. Intelligence gleamed in its depths, along with unmistakable pain. Before Everett could move closer, the air behind him crackled with energy. He spun around to find himself face to face with a humanoid figure. She, and Everett was relatively certain it was a she, stood nearly 7 feet tall, with alabaster skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Her features were sharp, angular, yet undeniably beautiful in an alien way. 4 arms emerged from a torso protected by what looked like living armor, plates that shifted and adjusted with her movements. Most striking were her eyes, solid silver, without pupil or iris, yet somehow expressing a fury that made Everett step back. "Step away from the Vorak," she said, her voice resonating with a harmonic quality that made the hairs on Everett's neck stand up. Her language was not one he recognized, yet he understood perfectly, suggesting some form of advanced translation technology. 3 of her hands held weapons that hummed with energy. The 4th gestured toward the massive creature. "If you value your continued existence, you will explain your presence here. Human." Everett raised his hands slowly. "I'm a medic with the Colonial Legion. My transport crashed nearby. I followed the blood trail to offer assistance." He gestured toward his medical kit. "The creature, Vorak, you called it, is badly wounded. I can help." The woman's silver eyes narrowed. "Your Colonial Legion has no authority in this sector. This is sovereign Krian territory." Krian. Everett had heard whispers of the species, a highly advanced civilization that controlled a significant portion of the Outer Rim. They were known for their isolationist policies and overwhelming military might. Few humans had ever encountered them directly, and even fewer had lived to tell about it. "I meant no trespass," Everett said carefully. "Our navigation systems failed during transit. The crash was an accident." The woman studied him, then glanced at the wounded creature. The Vorak made a low, keening sound that seemed to affect her deeply. Her posture changed, the weapons in her hands lowering slightly. "The Vorak is dying," she said, and Everett detected a note of desperation beneath her commanding tone. "Our healers are too far away to arrive in time." Everett took a cautious step toward the creature. "I specialize in xenobiology. If you'll allow me to examine it, I might be able to stabilize its condition until your healers arrive." She hesitated, clearly torn between distrust and necessity. Finally, she lowered her weapons completely. "You will do more than examine. You will save it, human. And if you fail..." She left the threat unspoken, but Everett understood perfectly. "I'll need to get closer," he said, already moving toward the wounded Vorak. "Can you tell me anything about its physiology? Blood type? Known allergies to medications?" The woman moved alongside him with fluid grace. "The Vorak is not merely an animal. It is a sacred creature, bonded to the royal bloodline. Its lifeblood contains elements your scanners cannot identify." She placed one hand on the creature's heaving flank. "I am Cora. The Vorak responds to my presence. It will allow your touch while I am here." Everett knelt beside the wound, his scanner providing more detailed readings now that he was closer. The gash was deep, exposing layers of tissue unlike anything he'd studied. But the principles of trauma care remained consistent across species. Stop the bleeding, prevent infection, promote healing. "This wound was caused by a weapon," he observed, noting the cauterized edges. "Energy-based, from the tissue damage pattern." Cora's expression darkened. "Yes. We were ambushed during atmospheric descent. My guards diverted the attackers while I guided the Vorak to shelter." Everett opened his medical kit, selecting a specialized biogel designed to adapt to various physiologies. "I need to clean the wound before applying treatment. This might cause pain." "The Vorak can endure," Cora said, but her hand stroked the creature's scales in a gesture that seemed meant to comfort. As Everett worked, he maintained a professional dialogue, explaining each step. The Vorak's tissues were responding well to the basic treatments, but the creature's breathing grew increasingly labored. His scanner detected a toxin spreading through its system, likely introduced by the weapon that caused the wound. "There's a biotoxin present," Everett reported, rummaging through his supplies for a universal anti-venom compound. I'll need to neutralize it before it reaches vital organs. Cora's silver eyes widened. Biotoxin? This was no random attack. This was assassination. Everett paused, the implications sinking in. You're a high-value target. I am Cora, Empress of the Seven Sectors, sovereign of the Korean Dominion, she stated, as if it were obvious. The galaxy knows me as the Iron Empress, and someone wishes me dethroned. Everett nearly dropped his equipment. He was treating the companion animal of the most feared ruler in known space, a woman whose fleets had conquered dozens of worlds, whose name was whispered with fear, even in colonial command briefings. He swallowed hard, focusing on the task at hand. The toxin is complex, but I think I can synthesize a counteragent. He worked quickly, combining compounds from his kit. This is temporary. It will slow the toxin's progress, not eliminate it completely. Will it be enough until my ship can retrieve us? Cora asked. How long? 12 planetary hours, at minimum. My flagship was forced to retreat during the ambush. Everett frowned. Then we need something stronger. He glanced at his limited supplies, then at the Voric's massive body. I'll need to establish a filtration system to clean the toxin from its bloodstream, similar to dialysis in humans. Cora watched intently as Everett improvised a treatment system, repurposing equipment from his medical kit. The Voric's anatomical structure was unlike anything he'd encountered, but the basic principles of circulation allowed him to locate major blood vessels and establish access points. As he worked, Cora spoke quietly. Few would risk themselves for a creature they do not understand. Why do you help, human? Everett didn't look up from his work. I took an oath to preserve life, all life. Besides, I'm not exactly volunteering. You did threaten me. A sound emerged from Cora that might have been a laugh. True, yet you work with care beyond mere self-preservation. That's the job, Everett replied simply. The makeshift filtration system was beginning to function, drawing the Voric's purple blood through a series of chemical baths before returning it to the creature's body. This should buy us time. Hours passed as Everett monitored the Voric's condition. The creature's vital signs stabilized, its breathing becoming more regular. Cora remained nearby, occasionally touching the Voric's scales or speaking to it in a language Everett's translator couldn't decipher. Your technology is primitive, she observed, watching him adjust the filtration system. Yet effective. Our healers would use genetic manipulation to neutralize the toxin at the molecular level. We make do with what we have, Everett replied. Though I wouldn't turn down some advanced Korean medical tech right about now. Cora tilted her head, studying him. You are not what I expected from a human military officer. And what did you expect? Aggression, fear, prejudice. She gestured to the Vorak. Not compassion for a creature so unlike yourself. Everett shrugged. I've treated dozens of species. Difference becomes normal after a while. Their conversation was interrupted by a distant rumbling. Cora straightened, her 4 hands moving to her weapons. Aircraft approaching. Multiple signatures. Your people, Everett asked hopefully. Impossible to determine without leaving shelter. She moved toward the entrance. Continue your treatment. I will investigate. Everett nodded, turning his attention back to the Vorak. The creature's largest eye remained fixed on him, a surprising intelligence evident in its gaze. You're doing well, he told it, checking the filtration system. The toxin levels are dropping. The Vorak made a low sound, almost like a purr, and one of its limbs shifted slightly toward Everett. He cautiously placed his hand on the offered appendage, feeling a surprising warmth pulsing beneath the scales. Cora returned moments later, her expression tense. It is not my flagship. The ships bear the insignia of Princess Vex. Is that bad? Vex is my sister. My ambitious, treacherous sister. Cora's armor plates shifted, seeming to bristle. She leads the faction that opposes my rule. This attack carries her signature. She has always envied my bond with the Vorak. Everett processed this information with growing unease. So she's trying to kill your pet, as a way to weaken you. Cora's silver eyes flashed. The Vorak is not a pet. It is a sacred apex predator, bonded to the ruler of the Korean people for millennia. The bond enhances our natural abilities and validates our right to rule. Without the Vorak, my authority would be challenged by every ambitious noble in the Dominion. Starting with your sister, Everett concluded. Precisely, and now she approaches with a battalion? Everett glanced at the Vorak, then at his limited medical supplies. The creature can't be moved yet. The filtration system needs at least another 4 hours to complete the toxin removal. Cora's multiple hands clenched. Then we defend this position until my flagship arrives. She studied Everett. Can you fight, medic? I'm trained, but my specialty is saving lives, not taking them. Then continue your work. I will ensure you have time to complete it. She moved toward the entrance, weapons humming to life. If I fall, the Vorak will protect you until the treatment is complete. It understands the importance of your work. Before Everett could protest, Cora stepped outside. Moments later, the sound of energy weapons discharge echoed through the stone chamber. He wanted to check on her, but the Vorak's condition demanded his full attention. The toxin was proving more resilient than expected, requiring constant adjustments to the filtration chemistry. The battle outside intensified, the sounds growing closer. Everett worked faster, increasing the flow rate through the filtration system. The Vorak's vital signs remained stable, but the creature was growing restless, its massive limbs shifting against the stone floor. Suddenly, the chamber filled with armed figures, Korean soldiers, their armor similar to Cora's, but less elaborate, surrounded Everett and the Vorak. Their weapons were trained on him. Cora strode in behind them, a gash on one of her forearms leaking silver fluid. Status report, she demanded. Toxin removal at 65%, Everett responded, trying to ignore the weapons pointed at him. Another 2 hours should... We don't have 2 hours, Cora interrupted. Vex's flagship has entered orbit. My sister has called for parley. One of the Korean soldiers stepped forward. Empress, we must evacuate you immediately. The Vorak can be... The Vorak will not be abandoned, Cora stated with such authority that the soldier stepped back. And neither will the human healer. But, Empress... Silence, Zephyr, Cora turned to Everett. Can your treatment be continued aboard my vessel? Everett considered the makeshift system. If we move carefully, yes. But any disruption to the blood flow could cause a setback. Then we shall move with utmost care. She gestured to her soldiers. Secure a transport path. The Vorak and the human are to be escorted to the Sovereign's will with all precaution. The next hour was a blur of activity. Korean soldiers constructed a hovering platform beneath the massive Vorak, lifting it with a technology that seemed to manipulate gravity itself. Everett maintained the filtration system throughout the transfer, monitoring vital signs with growing concern. The stress of movement was taxing the creature's already compromised system. Outside, the sandstorm had subsided, revealing a landscape dotted with ships. Cora's forces had established a perimeter around a massive vessel that could only be her flagship, a structure of gleaming metal and pulsing energy that dwarfed any spacecraft Everett had ever seen. As they approached the ship, another vessel descended from the clouds. Unlike Cora's flagship, which combined angles and curves in an almost organic design, this new arrival was all sharp edges and aggressive lines, bristling with weapons. Vex, Cora murmured, watching the ship's approach. Right on schedule. The Vorak was carefully loaded into a massive bay within the Sovereign's will, Everett never leaving its side. The interior of the ship was unlike any human vessel. Corridors that seemed to pulse with life, surfaces that responded to touch, and everywhere. The sense of being inside something both mechanical and organic. Once the Vorak was settled in what appeared to be a medical chamber, Cora addressed Everett directly. "My War Council demands your presence. They wish to understand how a human medic came to treat the sacred Vorak." "I'd rather stay with my patient," Everett replied, adjusting the filtration system. "The toxin removal is at a critical stage. Kale, our high healer, will monitor the process." She gestured to a Korean who had entered the chamber. Unlike the soldiers, this individual had only 2 arms and wore no visible armor. Instead, draped in flowing garments, embedded with what looked like medical tools. Kale approached. Silver eyes narrowed with skepticism. "This primitive system is maintaining the Vorak's life?" Everett bristled at the term primitive, but kept his tone professional. "The filtration is removing a complex biotoxin from the bloodstream. I've made adjustments for the Vorak's unique physiology." Kale examined the setup, reluctant admiration showing in his expression. "Improvised but effective. I will maintain it while you address the council." Everett provided detailed instructions, then followed Cora through the ship's winding corridors. They entered a chamber where a dozen Korean officials were engaged in heated debate. Their multiple arms gesticulated wildly, voices rising in harmonics that made Everett's translation device crackle. The room fell silent as Cora entered. All eyes turned to Everett. "The War Council," Cora announced. "My advisors and military commanders." She gestured to the tallest among them. "General Zephyr, whom you met earlier." Zephyr stepped forward, towering over Everett. "Empress, bringing a human aboard the flagship violates security protocols, especially with Princess Vex's forces in proximity." "The human saved the Vorak's life," Cora replied. "A debt acknowledged." Another council member spoke. "How do we know he wasn't part of the assassination attempt? A convenient rescuer placed to gain your trust?" Everett found his voice. "With respect, if I wanted the Vorak dead, I could have simply done nothing. It was dying when I found it." "The human speaks truth," Cora said. "And more importantly, the Vorak accepted his touch. It senses deception and would never allow an enemy such intimate contact." This seemed to quiet some objections, but Zephyr remained unconvinced. "What of his colonial allegiance? Humans have territorial ambitions in this sector." "I'm a medic," Everett stated firmly. "My allegiance is to life, regardless of species or politics." Before the debate could continue, a communications officer entered. "Empress, Princess Vex requests immediate parley. Her ship has established position alongside ours." Cora's expression hardened. "Prepare the diplomatic chamber. The human will accompany me." This announcement caused an uproar among the council. Zephyr stepped forward. "Empress, you cannot expose a state negotiation to an outsider, much less a human." "The human has earned a place at my side through service to the Vorak," Cora declared. "And his medical expertise may yet prove valuable." The diplomatic chamber was a stark contrast to the organic curves of the rest of the ship, all hard lines and formal symmetry. A large table dominated the center, surrounded by seats of varying designs to accommodate different physiologies. Cora positioned herself at the head of the table, gesturing for Everett to stand nearby. "My sister will attempt to provoke me," she said quietly. "She believes emotion clouds judgment." "Does it?" Everett asked. A small smile curved Cora's lips. "Of course, but not in the way she thinks." The chamber's doors slid open to admit a delegation of Koreans. At their head walked a figure that Everett immediately recognized as Cora's sister, despite their differences. Where Cora was alabaster, Vex was obsidian, her skin a deep, reflective black that seemed to absorb light. Her 4 arms were adorned with mechanical enhancements rather than natural armor, and her silver eyes gleamed with cold calculation. "Sister," Vex greeted, Her harmonic voice pitched lower than Cora's. "How gracious of you to receive me after such unpleasantness on the surface." "Your assassination attempt failed, Vex," Cora replied bluntly. "The Vorak lives, and with it, my claim to the throne." Vex's gaze shifted to Everett, surprise evident in her expression. "A human? On the flagship? Your standards continue to decline, sister." "This human saved the Vorak from your biotoxin," Cora stated. "A service to the Kree people that even you must acknowledge." Vex circled the table, her enhanced limbs moving with mechanical precision. "Impressive, for a species so recently emerged from their planetary cradle." She addressed Everett directly. "Tell me, human, did my sister conscript your services, or did you volunteer for this diplomatic incident?" "Neither," Everett replied evenly. "I'm a medic. I treated a wounded being. Politics wasn't a factor." "How charmingly naive." Vex returned her attention to Cora. "Your pet human aside, we have matters to discuss. The Dominion grows restless under your rule, sister. The genetic deterioration accelerates. The Vorak you cherish so much is merely the most visible symptom of our species' decline." Cora's posture stiffened. "The geneticists at Alter are making progress. The stabilization protocols have failed for 3 generations." Vex interrupted. "Our people are dying, Cora. Not dramatically in battle, but slowly. In our genetic code. Each generation weaker. Fewer viable offspring. More deformities." She gestured toward Everett. "While you cling to tradition, other species advance. This human's primitive medicine saved your precious Vorak when our advanced techniques could not. What does that tell you?" Everett's mind raced. Processing this new information, the Vorak's condition, the toxin had targeted specific genetic sequences, exploiting vulnerabilities that shouldn't exist in an apex predator. And Cora's concern had been deeper than mere political symbolism. "The Vorak isn't just bonded to you," he said suddenly, understanding dawning. "Its genetic structure is linked to your species somehow." All eyes turned to him. Cora's expression was unreadable, but Vex laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "The human is perceptive," she said. "Yes, medic. The Vorak species and the Kree are evolutionarily linked. Their decline mirrors our own, which is why my sister's failure to address the genetic deterioration is not merely poor governance. It is extinction." Cora rose from her seat, her forearms spread in a gesture that somehow conveyed both authority and entreaty. "I have dedicated my reign to finding a solution. The ancient methods have failed," Vex repeated. "We need new approaches. Sister, revolution, not tradition." "You mean war," Cora countered. "Conquest of new territories, new species to exploit for genetic material. Billions would die in such a campaign." "And our entire species will die without it," Vex replied coldly. Everett stepped forward, medical curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. "What exactly is the nature of the genetic deterioration?" Vex regarded him with surprise. "The human wishes a genetics lesson? Very well. Our species evolved in symbiosis with the Vorak. For millennia, this relationship was balanced. But 3 centuries ago, something changed. The bond between Kree and Vorak began to weaken. Genetic instability appeared first in the Vorak, then in our own people." "Environmental factors," Everett suggested. "Radiation, viral mutation, all investigated," Cora said. "The deterioration appears to be an unintended consequence of our own technological advancement. The very enhancements that made our civilization great are poisoning our genetic legacy. Which is why," Vex continued, "I advocate for a more direct solution. New genetic material, harvested from compatible species." The implications made Everett's blood run cold. "You're talking about non-consensual genetic harvesting, experimentation on sentient beings." I'm talking about survival, Vex replied sharply. A concept your military undoubtedly understands. The tension in the chamber was palpable. Cora's guards had shifted positions, hands near weapons. Vex's delegation mirrored them. There must be another way, Everett said, looking between the sisters. In human medicine, we sometimes find that the simplest approach is overlooked in favor of complex solutions. And what would you suggest, human? Vex asked, her tone mocking. Before Everett could respond, an alarm sounded. A communications officer burst into the chamber. Empress, the Vorax condition is deteriorating rapidly. Without hesitation, Everett sprinted from the diplomatic chamber, Cora close behind. They raced through the ship's corridors to the medical bay, where the Vorak lay, thrashing weakly. The filtration system was intact, but clearly ineffective against whatever new crisis had emerged. Kale, the high healer, looked up in distress. The toxin has mutated. It's attacking the genetic bonds at the molecular level. Everett grabbed his scanner, running it over the Vorak's massive body. The readings confirmed Kale's assessment. The toxin had reconfigured itself to target specific genetic sequences. This isn't random, Everett said, mind racing. This toxin was engineered to attack the specific genetic markers that link the Vorak to the Korean people. He looked up at Cora. This isn't just an assassination attempt. It's a genocide weapon. Cora's silver eyes widened with horror. Behind them, Vex entered the medical bay, her expression uncharacteristically concerned. Is this your doing? Cora demanded, turning on her sister. Don't be absurd, Vex snapped. I want control of the Dominion, not its destruction. This weapon targets the very genetic markers I need to preserve. Everett ignored their argument, focusing on the Vorak's deteriorating condition. I need to see your genetic research, he told Kale. Everything you have on the Korean Vorak bond. The high healer hesitated, looking to Cora for permission. She nodded sharply, and Kale activated a holographic display. Complex genetic sequences appeared in three-dimensional renderings, showing the Vorak's DNA alongside Korean genetic code. Everett studied the display, identifying similarities and divergences. The toxin is attacking the shared sequences, he observed. But if we could stabilize those sequences specifically— Impossible, Kale stated. We've tried genetic stabilizers for decades. The deterioration always overcomes them. Because you're treating the symptoms, not the cause, Everett muttered, an idea forming. What if the deterioration isn't a disease, but an imbalance, a system trying to correct itself? Vex stepped closer, her mechanical limbs whirring softly. Explain, human. In evolutionary terms, species adapt or die. But the Korean Vorak bond artificially preserved certain genetic traits beyond their natural lifespan. Everett pointed to specific sequences in the hologram. These markers show signs of forced stability, like a system under pressure. Our ancestors engineered the bond to enhance our capabilities, Cora acknowledged. It has been maintained through ritual and technology for thousands of years. And now it's breaking down, Everett concluded. Not because something's attacking it, but because it's trying to evolve naturally and can't. He turned to Kale. Do you have genetic samples from Kryan individuals before the deterioration began? Ancient specimens, yes, the high healer confirmed. Preserved in the genetic archives. And the Vorak's genome from the same period? Kale nodded, accessing another set of holographic data. Everett compared the ancient and modern genetic sequences, confirmation of his theory growing stronger. The deterioration isn't random mutation, it's targeted adaptation. The shared genes are trying to diverge naturally, but the artificial bond is forcing them to remain linked, creating genetic stress. So what's your solution, medic? Vex demanded. Allow the bond to break? Surrender our evolutionary advantage? Not break, Everett clarified. Transform. Instead of forcing stasis, Create a flexible bond that allows for natural genetic drift within parameters. He turned to Cora. Your ancestors created the bond to serve a purpose. That purpose can be preserved while allowing the genetics to evolve. Cora's expression was thoughtful. Such an approach has never been attempted. Because your scientists are too specialized, Everett said, working rapidly on the holographic interface. They're experts in Korean genetics, but they're trying to maintain a system created centuries ago. Sometimes an outside perspective sees patterns that experts miss. He integrated his medical scanner with the Korean genetic database, combining human medical algorithms with Korean genetic science. The resulting model showed a potential pathway, a genetic treatment that would preserve the essential Korean-Vorak bond while allowing for natural adaptation. This could work, Kale admitted, studying the model. But implementation would require... A violent tremor shook the ship, throwing them all off balance. Alarms blared throughout the medical bay. "We're under attack!" Zephyr's voice came over the communication system. "Rogue elements of Princess Vex's fleet have opened fire." Vex's expression contorted with rage. "Those fools! I gave no such order." "Your ambition has inspired others, sister," Cora said grimly. "Not all share your restraint." Another blast rocked the ship. The Vorak's vital signs plummeted further, its massive body convulsing. "We're out of time," Everett said. "The Vorak won't survive this stress in its current condition. We need to implement the treatment now." "Impossible," Kale protested. "The procedure would take days to synthesize and test." "Not with your technology combined with my approach," Everett insisted. "I need a genetic synthesizer and access to the Vorak's primary circulatory system." Cora made her decision instantly. "Do it," she turned to Vex. "Sister, whatever our differences, we cannot allow the Vorak to perish. Will you help defend this ship while the human works?" Vex hesitated only briefly. "My forces will target the rogue elements, but Cora, if this fails, the Dominion falls." "If this fails, the Dominion was already lost," Cora replied. She turned to Everett. "You have one planetary hour, human. Save the Vorak, and you save our species." The next 60 minutes were the most intense of Everett's medical career. Working with Kale and a team of Korean geneticists, he adapted his treatment model into a practical application. Human medical principles merged with Korean genetic technology, creating a hybrid approach that neither civilization would have developed independently. Around them, the battle raged. The ship shuddered with impacts, power fluctuating as systems were damaged and rerouted. Everett worked through it all, his focus absolute. "The genetic stabilizer is ready," he announced finally, holding up a vial of luminescent fluid. "But administration will be tricky. The Vorak's entire system needs to be infused simultaneously." Cora stepped forward. "I will guide it through the bond." "What does that mean?" Everett asked. In answer, Cora placed her 4 hands on the Vorak's heaving flank. Silver light spread from her touch, flowing across the creature's scales. The bond between Empress and Vorak allows for direct biological communication. Inject the stabilizer into the primary circulatory node. Everett located the indicated point, a pulsing nexus of vessels near what would be the heart in a human. With surgical precision, he administered the treatment, watching as the luminescent fluid disappeared into the Vorak's massive body. For several tense moments, nothing happened. The Vorak's vital signs continued to fluctuate wildly. Then, slowly, a change began. The creature's scales shifted color, pulsing with internal light that matched the rhythm of Cora's silver glow. "It's working," Kale breathed, watching the genetic monitors. "The toxin is being neutralized, and the genetic stress patterns are stabilizing." Everett's scanner confirmed it. The treatment was spreading throughout the Vorak system, strengthening damaged genetic sequences while allowing for natural variation. The rigid bond was becoming flexible, preserving connection without forcing stasis. The fleet reports the rogue ships are retreating, Zephyr announced over the communication system. Princess Vex's loyalists have secured the perimeter. Cora maintained her connection with the Vorak, the silver light growing stronger. I can feel the change, she said, her voice distant. The bond is different, stronger, yet more natural. Vex returned to the medical bay, her mechanical limbs battle-scarred. She watched in silence as the Vorak's condition stabilized, its breathing becoming deep and regular. You've done the impossible, human, she said finally. Preserved the bond while allowing for evolution. Not impossible, Everett corrected. Just improbable. Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected sources. The aftermath of the crisis unfolded rapidly. With the immediate threat neutralized, Cora called for a ceasefire with Vex's forces. The sisters, united by the near loss of the Vorak and the revelation of a potential solution to their species' genetic deterioration, established a tentative alliance. Everett found himself suddenly elevated from prisoner to honored guest. The War Council, initially suspicious of his presence, now treated him with a respect that bordered on reverence. The human medic who had saved the sacred Vorak, and potentially the Kriean species, was no longer an outsider, but a valued ally. 3 days after the crisis, Cora summoned Everett to her private chambers, aboard the Sovereign's will. The room was both austere and elegant, reflecting its occupant's dual nature as warrior and ruler. The Vorak continues to improve, she informed him as he entered. Kale reports that the genetic stabilization is spreading throughout its system, exactly as you predicted. That's excellent news, Everett replied. Have there been any signs of rejection or unexpected side effects? None. In fact, the process appears to be accelerating. Cora gestured to a holographic display showing genetic models. The stabilized sequences are being naturally incorporated into the Vorak's cellular regeneration. And more importantly, through the bond, into my own genetic structure as well. Everett studied the display with professional interest. The adaptive patterns are developing beautifully. If this continues, the treatment could be applied to the wider Kriean population. Which brings me to why I summoned you. Cora deactivated the hologram, fixing Everett with her silver gaze. Vex and I have reached an agreement. The genetic research facility at Alter will be repurposed for development of your treatment protocol. We wish you to oversee the project. Everett blinked in surprise. I'm flattered, but I'm still a Colonial Legion officer. My assignment has been renegotiated, Cora interrupted. I have communicated with your Colonial Command. They were most accommodating once they understood the diplomatic opportunities presented by your unprecedented position. My position? As the first human to serve as Deputy Imperial Healer to the Kriean Dominion, Cora clarified, as if it were obvious. A role created specifically for you. Everett struggled to process this development. This is unexpected. Is it? Cora asked, a hint of amusement in her tone. You saved the Vorak, and by extension, the throne. You've potentially solved a genetic crisis that has plagued our civilization for generations. Your value to the Dominion is incalculable. And to you? The question escaped before Everett could reconsider its implications. Cora's expression softened, her multiple hands making a gesture he couldn't interpret. When one wears the mantle of Empress, personal considerations are rarely permitted. The title subsumes the individual. She stepped closer to him. Yet, in these past days, I have found myself thinking not as the Empress, but as Cora, a rare occurrence. Everett felt a strange tension in the air between them, not hostile, but charged with something he couldn't name. And what does Cora think? That perhaps the universe has a curious symmetry. The Vorak and Kriean evolved in symbiosis, strengthening each other. Perhaps our civilizations could do the same. Her silver eyes studied him intently. You see patterns others miss. Everett Pierce. You approach problems from unexpected angles. These qualities are valuable to the Dominion and to me. The weeks that followed transformed Everett's life in ways he could never have anticipated. Stationed at the Alter Research Facility, he worked alongside Korean scientists to refine and expand the genetic stabilization protocol. Vex, surprisingly, became one of his strongest allies, her revolutionary perspective complementing his outsider approach. The bond between Cora and the Vorak continued to evolve, strengthening in ways that surprised even the oldest Korean geneticists. The sacred creature regained its vigor, its scales shifting with vibrant colors that hadn't been seen in generations. And through the bond, Cora herself seemed to change, not physically, but in subtle aspects of presence and energy that the Korean nobility noticed with whispered awe. Everett's relationship with the Empress developed alongside their professional collaboration. What began as reluctant cooperation transformed into mutual respect, then into something deeper. During her visits to Alter, Cora would often seek Everett out for private conversations that had little to do with genetics or politics. "Your perspective changes me," she confessed during one such meeting as they walked through the facility's botanical gardens. For centuries, the Empress was a role to fulfill, a position defined by tradition and expectation. I was Cora only in the privacy of my thoughts. "And now?" Everett asked, watching as she ran one of her 4 hands along the exotic foliage. "Now I find myself wondering what Cora wants, not merely what the Empress must do." She turned to him, silver eyes reflecting the garden's soft illumination. "It is unsettling and strangely liberating." Their connection deepened as the genetic research progressed. The treatment protocol expanded from the Vorak to select Korean volunteers, with promising results. The genetic deterioration that had threatened the species for generations began to reverse, cellular regeneration accelerating beyond projected models. 6 months after the crisis that had brought them together, Everett and Cora stood in the observation dome of the Alter facility, watching as Vex's ship docked alongside Cora's flagship. The sisters had established a dual governance structure, with Vex overseeing technological advancement, while Cora maintained cultural and diplomatic authority. The Council reports that the first generation of fully treated Korean children have begun to manifest enhanced abilities, Cora said, her voice containing a note of wonder. Not merely the restoration of what was lost, but new adaptations, evolution, as you predicted. "Life finds a way," Everett replied, quoting an ancient human scientist. "Once we removed the artificial constraints, natural selection resumed its work." Cora turned to him, her 4 arms making the gesture he now recognized as deep appreciation. "Your colonial command has extended your assignment indefinitely. They seem quite pleased with the alliance benefits." "And are you pleased with the arrangement?" Everett asked. "The Empress is satisfied with the diplomatic advantages," Cora replied formally. Then her tone softened. "But Cora would prefer that you stayed for reasons beyond politics or medicine." Everett smiled, understanding the significance of her words. In Korean culture, such personal declaration from the Empress was unprecedented. "I've been thinking about that. My oath as a medic was to preserve life and relieve suffering. I think I can fulfill that oath quite effectively here." The Vorak, now fully recovered, and twice as magnificent as when Everett had first encountered it, rumbled from its resting place at the far end of the dome. The creature had developed an attachment to the human who had saved it, often following him through the facility like an impossibly large and deadly shadow. "The Vorak approves," Cora observed, amusement in her voice. "It considers you part of its pack now." "High praise from the galaxy's apex predator," Everett replied, glancing at the massive creature. "Though I'm not sure how that works with human-Korean relations." Cora's silver eyes held his gaze. "We are creating new pathways. Everett Pierce, in genetics, in diplomacy, and perhaps in other domains as well. The future stretched before them, filled with possibilities neither could have imagined when they first met in that desert cave. The genetic stabilization project would eventually extend to the entire Korean population, transforming their civilization from one facing extinction to one embracing evolution. The alliance between human and Kryan worlds would grow, each species bringing unique perspectives to shared challenges. And at the heart of it all, an unlikely bond between a human medic who had followed a trail of purple blood across a desert and an alien empress who had learned that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected sources. As the twin suns of the altar system set beyond the dome's transparent walls, casting the chamber in golden light, Everett knew with certainty that his life had found a new purpose, not just as Deputy Imperial Healer, but as something more significant, a bridge between worlds, a catalyst for change, and perhaps most surprisingly, a companion to the woman beneath the title of Galaxy's most feared Empress. The Vorak rumbled contentedly, sensing the harmony between its bonded ruler and the human healer. In its ancient, predatory consciousness, it recognized something fundamental, that life, in all its diverse forms, finds strength in connection, and that sometimes the most powerful bonds are those forged in the midst of crisis, between beings who never expected to find common ground, much less shared purpose, or shared hearts.